Well, after another failed season for the Houston Rockets, who came up short in the 2020 season, losing in the second round 4-1 to LeBron and the Lakers, what's next with James Harden and the Houston Rockets? Honestly, I'm not too sure myself. But before we get into the video, if you end up liking the video, go ahead and leave a like on the video. I will be posting more videos like this in the near future. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the video. The Houston Rockets at this point have done just about everything they could to help James Harden bring them a championship. If we go back to a few years ago when they brought in Dwight, those two never really fit because, like Dwight himself said, they both thought they was the main option, and we all know that James Harden needs that Spalding in his hands. And Dwight Howard numbers did drop. Those two really never clicked just because Harden wanted the ISO, Dwight Howard wanted to be in the post, even though he's not good in the post. And then if you fast forward a few years afterwards when they brought in Chris Paul, and honestly, this was the best Houston team. They did have the #1 seed at one point, and they finished with the #1 seed, and they was one win away in 2017 from making the NBA Finals since like 1995 or whatever with Hakeem Olajuwon. And if Chris Paul doesn't go down, they probably beat those Warriors. But in Game 7, they did miss a record straight 27 missed three-pointers, and you just can't do that against the Warriors. So they probably would have won. And if you're asking yourself why didn't they make it the next year, well, they ran into those Warriors team again with Kevin Durant, and it was just no beating that team again. And then Chris Paul and James Harden started not liking each other because Chris Paul wanted the Houston Rockets to run a more traditional offense, him bring down the ball, set up plays, have guys out there for a reason instead of just standing in the corner watching Harden ISO the whole game. And that's what Harden wanted to continue to do because it was winning them games. But Harden didn't realize that that's just regular season, and that style of play is not going to work in the playoffs. Like Kobe said himself, being the ISO guy, not getting your teammates involved, that's not championship ball. Like, that's not going to win. And then the Houston Rockets go out and trade Chris Paul. I understand that the man does get injured a lot in the playoffs, and him and Harden wasn't clicking anymore, but still, it's okay if you trade Chris Paul, but then you trade him for Russell Westbrook. And Russell Westbrook cannot shoot. I instantly knew this team was going to be a bad team because they also got rid of Capella so that Westbrook and Harden could have more freedom in the paint, because we all know after what we just saw in the playoffs this year, Russell Westbrook cannot shoot. So they get rid of their only paint presence and run small ball, and now their tallest defender on the court is like 6'5", 6'6" PJ Tucker. And yeah, in the regular season that was working, but that's because teams typically play you once and they leave. They can't really develop a game plan for you on a heavy road trip. But in the playoffs, where you play the same team on a day-on-day basis, they could game plan and make changes to beat you. And that's exactly what they ran into. They ran into 6'8", 6'9" GOAT James, LeBron James, and then they ran into and also Anthony Davis. This series was really embarrassing for Russell Westbrook, mainly because for the most part he was guarded by Anthony Davis because they live with Russell Westbrook taking outside jumpers and doubling James Harden. And it worked out because Westbrook shot 7 for 27 from the three-point line. And yeah, that's a whopping 25%. And it's even more embarrassing because in Game 5, when the Rockets were down 29 in Game 5, Russell Westbrook only had 10 points, yelling at the Lakers saying, "Better double me." That's just really embarrassing. I'm a big Russell Westbrook fan, but he did go out sad on that. So what about Harden? Well, at this point, I think Harden is like okay with losing, long as he get his numbers, because 2 to 3 days after losing the playoffs, this man is with rapper Lil Baby on the island somewhere partying. And this is not the first time he's seen partying like right after a playoff loss. And then they ended up losing Mike D'Antoni, so now they have no coach, and it's just not looking good for the Rockets right now. People say you're never gonna win with Westbrook, but I came to the conclusion that with Harden as the main guy, you're never going to win. With his style of play, the one-man army ISO, that doesn't win championships. I think trading Harden and Westbrook would do the Rockets best, but there's nowhere they can fit. Harden has broken out into a ball-dominant guard, and Westbrook is a non-shooting turnover machine. Those two want to stay together from what they tell us, but I wouldn't be surprised if Russ gets up out of there with like a 3-team trade or something like that, courtesy of Harden, of course. And I don't think there's many people that wants to play with Harden or Westbrook because of their history. Giannis himself thinks Harden is a non-passing defending guard. Harden thinks Giannis is a non-steal big who just runs and dunk. Basically, people have their own narratives on Harden, and because Harden hasn't won any championships, he's not pulling any stars to want to come live in Houston and play on his same team as him. So the Rockets need a coach. Rumor has it they're looking at two coaches like Jeff Van Gundy and John Lucas, both terrible coaches by the way. The Houston Rockets need to stop the small ball, but they have Westbrook who can't shoot, and that lets other teams double Harden like what the Lakers was doing to them in the playoffs. And their contracts are so big, they don't really have room to go pick up anybody. Over the next 3 years combined, those two are expected like $260 million. And because of the fact that Harden simply is not a winner, the man hasn't accomplished anything but an MVP. He gets his numbers and stuff like that, but he doesn't really go far in the playoffs. He made the Western Conference Finals. Okay, that's cool, but he has no championships. No one wants to play with him, but he needs to be the second guy though. That's the thing. He needs to be the second guy because he's not getting teammates involved, so he needs to be the second guy. The Houston Rockets need a lot of help this offseason, and I don't know if they're going to be able to get it. But thank you guys for tuning into the video. I hope you guys do agree with me. If you don't agree with me, you can leave it down in the comments. We could talk about it. But if you did end up liking the video, please leave a like on the video. Subscribe if you're new. Once again, thank you for listening. And I'll be back at you with another video pretty soon. I'm out.